Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 292 of the Strength Coach Podcast, the official podcast of Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com. All right, I'm your host, Anthony Renna. The show notes are located on my site at ContinueFit.com. It's where you can find more about my book, Be Like the Best, and the Be Like the Best workbook. The book consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros, and after each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or a challenge that'll help you be like the best. Go to ContinueFit.com or BeLikeTheBest.com to check it out. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about his lecture that he did on the Perform Better Summer Series, which was called Training Kids. And he talked a little bit about speed windows, which is a long-term athletic development thing. And I just wanted to ask him a few questions about that. And we also talked about his old video from Intro to Complexes and why he doesn't really use them and what his love-hate relationship is with that. For the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment, I'm on with Alwyn Cosgrove. I asked Alwyn kind of if he had a crystal ball, what would he do differently if he knew in January that he was going to be shut down for 4 or 5 months? How would he prepare? So just kind of thinking ahead for all of us, like what are some things we should think about to kind of bulletproof our business? For the Train Heroic Data-Driven Coaching segment, Adam Doughty talks to Tim Robinson about internal and external cues. Speaking of crystal balls, if we had one, I would have made sure everybody had the Train Heroic app. Train Heroic is a human performance company that both Coach Boyle and I use to deliver our online training, and we've been blown away by their service and how they allow us to connect to our athletes. So if you're a coach and you're not using Train Heroic yet, what are you waiting for? They just launched plans that start as low as $10 a month, depending on how many people you got, and they have a free 14-day trial. Mention that I sent you. Coach Boyle and I will put a 4-week athlete development program into your account absolutely free. So if you're looking for the best online training solution in the game, go to trainheroic.com to take the 14-day free trial. For the Functional Movement System segment, Geralyn Coopersmith continues her 3-part series. Today's part 2. What to expect when implementing an FMS-based approach at your facility. She did it both at Equinox and at Nike, so she's got a little bit of experience there. Today, she talks about getting management buy-in. Last time was trainer buy-in. For the BodyByBoyleOnline.com, hit the gym with the Strength Coach segment, I got on former NFL player John Welbourn, and he's also the CEO of Power Athlete. I spoke to John all about his thoughts on power and how to achieve it. Talked about athleticism, talked about compensatory acceleration and how he used it to become a beast. His journey through an ACL injury since his college or really high school days, and his latest course on ACL prevention and rehab. We also talked about the life cycle of an athlete and so much more. Great stuff with John, so make sure you check that out. All right, lots of things to get to, so let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com Coach's Corner with Coach Boyle. StrengthCoach.com, the world's best source for strength and conditioning information. Remember, you can try it out for 3 days, just $1. You'll have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day answering questions. Check it out at StrengthCoach.com. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
All right, hanging in there. You did your Perform Better Free Summit Series lecture yesterday. I was on for 5 minutes and I got a question. How'd it go?
Well, I can't believe you're only on for 5 minutes.
I'm tired of listening to you.
Geez, real here, I needed the numbers to get up. I guess if you logged in, we got credit for you though. So
there you go. Exactly.
No, it was good. It's funny. I said we were on for a full 2 hours and we still left probably 50 questions unanswered because they had basically limited it to 2 hours. So the lecture was right about where it should have been, right at about 1 hour and 15. But then we did 45 minutes of Q&A and probably didn't get through to the halfway point of the questions.
Yeah, I do want to just bring that up. I'll probably bring it up in the ad too. I didn't realize, like you'd said, we do an hour and 15-minute lecture, but you were on for 45 minutes after that answering questions. So everybody, Mike was on for 2 hours. So remember, when you go on these things, there's a long question, and I'll be done at hour and 20, but still. Coach, let me ask you a question about it. Okay. You talked about speed windows, and I first heard about this from Titleist Performance Institute in their junior class, and talking about Istan Bialy, and this long-term athletic development idea, and that there's these speed windows. So for example, like from, let's say 7 to 10 is the first speed window. And what they were saying is if you miss that speed window, that's a chance to get the kids, I don't know what the word would be, get them to develop these fast twitch muscle fibers. But you said there is no compelling evidence to its validity. And part of it, you say your kids didn't, they didn't train at that age. They were playing. And one thing is, for me, is I agree with you. Obviously, I'm at my age. That's what I was doing at that time. But the argument that I'm going to have with you for this is the kids are not playing. They're not getting recess. They don't have access to PE. Maybe in my neighborhood, they absolutely do. I live in an affluent area in just above New York City. I know, obviously where you are, there's probably still PE and recess, but in a lot of the country, they don't have that. So, if you're in a situation like that, where the kids are, because these kids they're doing these play dates, they're on the computers, they're on their devices, and they're not getting out at that age. And to me, I thought it was what Titleist was doing with the Cyclone idea was simulating this idea of the playground, because they're not getting it. So if wouldn't you feel like if they weren't getting that play that your kids got, that I got, that you got, that this would be a good way to, present it?
Yeah, I think it would be. I guess my only thing was that there just isn't, when I did the research, there didn't seem to be any real evidence for these windows of opportunity. And when I look at how the kids mature, I'm not sure. I just am not sure if that's really true. Not that they still shouldn't play. I mean, I'm all for, like I said, kids should be playing and being involved in as much stuff as they can when they're in that 7 to 10 age bracket. And ideally, obviously, people are asking about training for obstacle races and endurance. And it's like, no, sprint sports, get them playing soccer, get them playing lacrosse, get them playing things where they have to run fast. You want to do that. I have no disagreement with that. My only thing was that there isn't any real solid evidence that I could find for this window of opportunity thing. And I would look at it and think, I mean, if it was my son for instance, then I missed a really big window. But we were doing, the type of speed training that we're doing right now, the kind of Tony Hawk, feed the cats, timed flying tens. We were doing that in that like 11 to 15 window, which is a big window, to look at that. I think that's not a window. That's not even a freaking door, it's an open stick. It's like it's a 4-year period. So that's the other thing too. I think, we kept going back to the idea of, keeping it simple. Get your kids involved in sports where they have to move fast. Do things. I mean, when I see kids jogging, I literally want to scream at parents when I see parents and kids jogging outside. They've got a little kid, someone, 8, 9, 10 years old out for a jog with them. I just want to be like, no, don't do it. And one of the guys that was on the webinar was mad about it. You could tell he's obviously an endurance athlete himself, because those are the people who get mad about these things. But, he was like, there's no evidence that training slow makes you slow. And I'm like, why do so many people say it? Maybe there isn't evidence per se in terms of who's really doing research on the effect of endurance training versus sprint training on kids. But I am going to tell you that I know one thing: training fast makes you fast. And I didn't get into the data. I get into the data in the longer version of that complete youth training product that we did. But like I said, I look at someone like my son. My son's speed change is nothing short of remarkable. And It's that way with some of the kids in his group in the same way. We've had the same kids, same group of, relatively speaking, 8 kids for a couple of years now, maybe going on 3 years. And they're really getting fast. So I can say to you that sprinting, if you look at logically, sprinting is going to make you fast, and not sprinting is probably not going to make you fast, right? I mean, I think we can just look at simple logic in that standpoint. And it's like I said, I just think the window of opportunity thing, when you show people this window of opportunity thing, 7 to 10, that leads people to think, oh, organized. I got to get my kid a speed coach, and we got to get outside, and we got to be doing sprint work and, speed mechanics. And I just don't believe that. I think that kids, particularly in that prior to 11 kind of age, should be playing and having fun.
Yep.
And even later, I mean, not that it shouldn't be fun after 11, but prior to that, the real emphasis should be on getting your kids, as I said in the talk yesterday, getting them to fall in love with practice, getting them to fall in love with sports, getting them to be passionate with the thing. I had this talk with Dwayne Carlisle one time, whose kids ended up being all really good athletes too. And one of the things I said is that my kids like practice. Like Michaela used to, when she was a kid, she would go to, to skills practice at hockey, and she'd be like, when she was 12, she'd like, Dad, I'm going to go to U12 skills, and then I'm going to stay the second hour and do U14 skills with the U14 kids. And I'd be like, great, knock yourself out. Go 2 hours in a row. You know what I mean? But she liked, and that was just practice. And Mark's the same way. Mark will go out, on his own and shoot lacrosse balls. He'll go out and shoot hockey pucks. They've learned to embrace the idea that you're going to get better if you practice. And again, should that be some sort of epiphany for a coach that, well, if you practice, you'll get better? Yeah, that seems pretty logical. If you sprint, you'll get faster. Yep, that seems pretty logical. If you lift weights, you'll get stronger. Pretty logical. And if you don't sprint, you probably won't get faster. If you don't lift weights, you probably won't get stronger. But, and then you can look at it with boys. They may get stronger and faster anyway, just, maturation.
Yeah.
Like I said, testosterone wins the race.
Well, like you said, it should be common sense, but a lot of times, and we've saw this really a lot with Daniel Coyle's work in the Talent Code, talking about how we don't practice enough and we start doing games. Right.
Exactly.
And that's part of the problem too. And it's interesting, I have John Welbourn on today, and he played pro football for 10 years, and he didn't I think he started, he was, he probably played the typical playground stuff. He said he did some martial arts. His dad got him into martial arts. He was the third child. What Malcolm Gladwell found out about the third child is they're usually the fastest. They got to keep up with their brothers. But he was saying, and I know I'm not sure if you agree with the compensatory acceleration stuff from Dr. Fred Hatfield about just this intent. And he probably lifted some of the quote unquote slow lifts fast. He said he attacked everything because that's where he does believe the same idea. You got to sprint. You got to, he did a lot of the, did some Olympic lifting and he just, as a young man, he did a lot of sprinting and obviously played football but he said he attacked the lifting and tried to just, kill it. Like even with the squats and his intensity and his speed with those lifts were definitely faster.
Well, and that's where it's funny. I'm not like, my thing with, and not as much, I like the compensatory acceleration idea. That's an old, like I said, an old Fred Hatfield idea, really old. The idea of lifting with intent. I think that's all good. The problem that we get into is when people are trying to do lighter weights and move them faster. And I, you know me, I've said this a lot of times. I don't like the idea of trying to do slow things fast. I think that can be problematic. So I think you have to be careful when you're trying to deadlift fast or bench press fast or squat fast, because you don't have the ability to decelerate at the end of range like you should. And, it just can get sloppy. So that's, but that's another sort of, it's a different argument, but I get John's idea. He was intense, and I think there's something to be said for, obviously, for intensity, for competitiveness. These are all things that are obviously beneficial to anybody and probably are what's going to kind of separate the men from the boys at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Coach, I think it's a similar topic. You did your intro. I reposted your intro to Complex's video that you did for Stack. And I had started, I was doing that. I got my hockey guys, and they're on the ice now. So I killed them for 4 months. They gained like 10, 12 pounds. But, they're a little beat up. So it's time to kind of take a little bit of a break because they are on the ice. So they're not going to have the same. So I kind of was starting them out with those complexes similar to what you were doing. Obviously, I'm influenced by you. And I do the same thing. I do the explosive lifts and the hard lifts like a bent row first. I love that idea. But you had said you have a love-hate relationship with them. And you always say shit plus shit equals more shit. In other words, bad cleans and bad squats makes for a bad combo. Now, I know you're saying this because you're not watching all of those and you have a huge facility. But, Mike, why not do 3 reps? Like you were talking about 6 reps. Like, why not do 3 cleans and then 3 bent rows and then 3 squats and, 3 presses, et cetera?
Interesting. I should probably go back and try it with, kind of with Mark and his friends and see what it looks like and see. With me, like the only time I've ever really done this, I did it with my Olympic hockey girls because they were so good and so proficient. And I did it with my BU guys because they were so good and so proficient. And we did it, kind of at the end of summer with our pro guys. Again, because, most of them, they're just really good athletes and it's easy. They don't fall apart. I just think you have to be careful what you endorse for the masses because it's very much like,
yes,
the CrossFit idea in terms of Olympic lifting is a really good idea, but probably not for your mom. You know what I mean? And it's like, so I think you just have to be careful when you're making kind of blanket recommendations. Like, hey, because I remember seeing, when I first encountered this complex idea, Istvan Bayi, who's Istvan Dvorak, I'm sorry about it. Istvan Bayi was the LTID guy. Istvan Dvorak was he was a Romanian strength coach in the 80s who was really into complexes and really into complexes more. He did some great talks at the NSCA. And a lot of it was because he just, he didn't have a lot of weights, didn't have great facilities. And that was what kind of got me going on the whole complex idea. But I remember being so excited about it when I went back to school, like back to BU, and then being so disappointed by how bad my guys were. You know what I mean? Thinking, and that's why I made the statement. Sometimes you look at something and think that's a really, really good idea. Except I tried it and it didn't come out the way that I wanted it to. And that happens. That's one of the things when we try stuff out at MBSC. Sometimes we'll try things and just realize, wow, that was not as teachable as we thought it was going to be, or not as learnable as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I feel about complexes. I feel like, when you've got kids who are struggling to learn to clean, then do I really want to be combining, clean and front squat or clean front squat, bent over row, or whatever it is. And so we just haven't gone that route. We've probably gone more like, okay, let's keep those lifts and maybe do, we might only be doing 2 sets, but we're getting, we're kind of warm up heavy set sort of stuff done.
Yeah.
And one thing for us, the real thing, and this is what I tried to emphasize with the talk yesterday, is consistency really matters, because consistency will trump everything else. And that's what I'm seeing with my son Mark's group, is that we don't go crazy. I'm not screaming and yelling, we're not trying like, lift more, lift more, lift more. It's a very kind of casual approach to strength training, I guess. And that's maybe people are like, oh my God, that's probably a terrible way to describe it. But that's sort of how I would look at it, in the sense that, it's like, it's the slow cooking idea, versus we're not going to sear these kids. We're going to slow cook them. We're going to take our time. And the end result, it goes back to like the Zach DeChant movement over Max's thing. When we're at that point in their senior year of high school, thinking, wow, they've got 700 workouts under their belt, they're going to be pretty strong. And it will have been very gradual, very kind of slow cooked, but they'll be really strong because they're already, if you came in and watched them now, they easily, they'll just grab the 50-pound dumbbells and bang out sets of split squats. They'll clean 135 pretty easy. There's a bunch of them now that are benching 135 for 5. They're starting to make progress, but there's no like beast. There's no kid like, oh my God, look at him. He's doing, 225 on the bench. There's none of that. And it's just everybody's kind of slow and steady trying to win that race.
Yep. The thing is, my why with this thing too, though, is especially right now, I think, in the 3 to 4 rep thing is number one, it does save some time. We do have to kind of get more bang for your buck with this time idea, especially, you wrote we just posted MBSC in the COVID era, the future strength conditioning, which we've talked about your 12-minute block. So we don't have as much time. And I feel like it goes back to that idea that you were talking about a while back was like with the kids over that, each week, like if we do it, we're getting reps in each time and they're learning each time. And that's why I feel like, okay, bang out 3 cleans. I know they might not look great, but let's just do them. Let's get them in. And we're starting to, they're starting to get that experience to slow cook them. Even if it is only 3 reps, we kind of bang it out. Because if you're doing less 3 reps, then, you can do 2 sets that much quicker. The guys are, the guys and girls are finishing much quicker, and then they can do them again. And I feel like you said too, I've approached it similar as well, where I'm trying not to coach listening to Nick Michaelman.
I think in August we'll be out of sort of lacrosse games and tournaments and stuff like that, because that's the other thing. I try to not do anything different when we're in, like right now for the lacrosse kids, this is a big in-season period for them in that they're playing real competitive games on the weekend. But once we get to August, I think that'll be over, and maybe I'll throw some of that at them and see what we end up getting. It'll be interesting.
All right, good stuff. Well, Coach, we'll let you go on that note. So thanks again, and we will speak to you next time.
All right. Thanks, Ant. I appreciate it. And congratulations. I saw that your little tweet about the podcast. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. We're coming on 13 years. Pretty crazy.
I know. It really is. I was talking to somebody about it today, and I couldn't even think of the number. I was like, I don't know. Anthony started a podcast. I was like, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I was like, then I saw 13. I was like, 13 years?
All right, guys, right now at Perform Better, remember, even though we're exercising social distancing, doesn't mean we have to stop learning. They're excited to be hosting the free summer seminar series for everybody. And there's live presentations and Q&A sessions via Zoom. If you heard Coach Boyle a little while ago, he said he was on for 45 minutes answering questions. So it goes until September. I go on August 27th, so I'm looking forward to that. But make sure you take advantage of that. Check it out at performbetter.com. All right, now it's time for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. I'm here with Alwyn Cosgrove. Alwyn, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me back. Been a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. Well, last time we were talking about, you did get closed again. And we're talking about this idea about just kind of staying in the game mentally and then talking to our clients or whatever, holding on to this idea, staying positive, and this, having this idea about, you're more than just a gym. But what I want to do is, this is not a, what would you do if you were 18 again? What would you tell young Alwyn Cosgrove type of question? This is, it's January 1st, and I'm saying, and I have information. I say, Alwyn, the country's going to close down on March 15th, and you're not going to be able to open your business for 4 months. Was there, is there something that you feel like, and to me, this is more about, this is the future. We have to start thinking about the future model. We're not just a gym. We have to think differently, quote unquote, it's the new normal, whatever. But talk to me about, if I gave you that information on January 1st, what do you think you would start doing to prepare in those 3 months for being shut down, to not even have to worry about pivoting so much because you're already there?
First up would be Vegas. We got good odds on that prediction. January 1, right? Just bet on that. So what I want to think, let's just plan that gyms are illegal, right? An indoor facility is now illegal, right? So it doesn't matter what you think about that. Like you can the alcohol count should be allowed. People should be allowed to have alcohol at 18 or 21 or whatever. This is a decision, and your personal feelings are aside. We are pros, and we will follow the experts. But that does not mean that everything that you know has gone away. You're a problem solver. So what I would have done is how the only thing that has changed when we get right down to it, and I know it's a big change, is the delivery system of your knowledge has changed, right? So if you think of everything that you do, you're a fitness problem solver. It could be program design. It could be program troubleshooting, where you look over what someone's doing. It could be you develop, at-home programs for no equipment programs. You can do, what are the other restrictions? Are you allowed to do outdoor workouts? Can you do online training? One of the first things you do is, what's your internet like at your facilities or where you're doing your Zoom calls? Upgrade that. Get better lighting. How can you have a studio if you're going to be an online celebrity at this point? The only thing that we can't do is train a person in an environment that's indoors. Now, again, I'm not going to just say that's a nothing, restriction. It's crippling for a lot of people. But what I knowing that on January 1, I'm out of limbo right then, because I know what I'm doing. And I think that's the sort of angst with a lot of people at this point, is they're just kind of waiting to see, our gym's going to allow to be reopened. Let me know either way. Decide yourself that you're going to write books, you're going to write articles, you're going to do online coaching, you're going to do programming. Maybe it's program design in our traditional model where you charge a couple of $100 and you I'm working with you in customized as a more individual program, but maybe you're selling a generic, I hate that phrase because it means low level, and I don't mean that. You're selling a program that is maybe a $47 a month. They get access to the workout, right? Everybody gets the same workout. Maybe you can get 10 people. Maybe, if you can get 10 people paying you $50, then we can upgrade some of them and to something that there's opportunities here, right? People are still going to need your knowledge, right? It's just you've been restricted. The challenge is, you go online now, you're competing with all the good coaches in the world, so you better be good. And that's the fear. Here's my idea. The opportunity now is amazing. Somebody in Scotland can hire you, right? You don't have to be local anymore. Like, you just expanded your target market. If you're trying to tell me you can't get 50 people in the world to buy your workout program, come on, man, right? Like, there's ways out of this, and it's just, it's and the power of what you're saying, Anthony, is we know what's going to happen, and right now we don't. But you might want to just close your gym anyway. Like, I know you left that part of your old world. I know that for us, we started doing more business consulting. And I know other trainers who went into, like, they were putting on, like, different events and things. Just realize all your skill sets, just write them all down, and there's a way to monetize every single one of them, right? And we've got the technology now. I can video an exercise on my phone and hit send. That used to be hard, right? Now the technology's there. Upgrade your cameras, upgrade your microphones, get the lighting sorted, get your internet fixed, sell your equipment, right? Close the gym, move everything into storage, rent. Maybe you're an equipment rental company now. Like, there's so many options. Like, it's easy to see the obstacles. It's a little harder to see the opportunities, but trust me, they're there. There are some people absolutely crushing it financially right now because they're seeing how to pivot and adjust. Be one of those people.
Yeah. I think, like we talked about, just about that idea, just, being prepared for those situations. Even, like you talked about, look, there's real-time workouts that you could do through Zoom. You could also do, and even this is, by the way, to me, if you are allowed to open up, you should still be doing these things. So
100%.
If 100%. What happens is, if you get closed down again, nobody's saying, well, how do I use Zoom? How do I use the Train Heroic app? How do I do this? You've already done that. Yeah. I told you when I closed my gym, when I sold it in 2016, I moved upstairs to the 3rd floor to do my stuff here, and I rented from the guy I sold to I trained my guys once a week. They used the Train Heroic app when they were with me. And then on Monday and Friday or Saturday, they used it at their home gym or whatever. So when shit like this happens, nobody was saying, Ant, what am I going to do? They just said, cool, okay. Oh, yeah, oh, this sucks. I love the gym, but, okay, well, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing how do I do the deadlift without the barbell? Oh, yeah, with the dumbbells? Great. Yep. Oh, yeah, here's the video. Boom. But there's that. There's kind of setting your gym up. Like there's some people that like app-based, they like the individual programming. But like you said, Train Heroic has an opportunity for you to put stuff in Marketplace where you can sell $25 a month, $30 a month, people all over the world, they could just get your program. So there's, you have to think of, it's like some people are visual, some people they like to read, some people like to listen, right? They're different learners. Well, you have to think of it like that too. Some people will want their fitness delivered in a different way, have the opportunity. I just started for the first time remote training with people that I've never seen before. So I'm never going to see them.
The single biggest thing that we talked about is the business model was broken, and now it got pressure tested and collapsed.
Yeah.
Right now, if you're allowed to open, why are you just going to sell this same monthly membership where people come in 3 times a week? What if you charged $100 for once a month and then it was on the app? They trained at home.
Yep.
Right. There's so many other options to do it. Don't just get, and I agree 100% with you. If everything was allowed to reopen and you go back to just that old model, that was dumb.
Yeah.
There's you've got to have this structure that if your power goes out and your power's down for a week because a tree collapsed or the internet in your area is bad, or your internet goes down when you're about to teach a Zoom class, or internet becomes illegal. We find out something, right? And the internet gets banned for safety. What else you got going on? You've got to constantly be able to adjust. We're actually in a profession where we can adjust, right? A barber can't.
Yeah.
He needs to be there. Yeah. The only way they can do this is with, some medical situations. There's no other ways for them to generate money. And you're going to pay $47 a month for a barber's home haircut tips? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But fitness isn't going away. Exercise isn't going away. Nutrition isn't going away. Your knowledge is more valuable than ever. It's just one of your delivery systems has, it's gotten a little faulty right now. That's all. Yeah. That's all. And it's, like I said, I'm not being flippant about this. I know some people are hurting, but let's get out of limbo and let's look at what the fitness profession 2.0 or 3.0, whatever we're going to call it, is going to look like. And, that's going to look, there's going to be a lot of remote coaching and different ways to deliver your knowledge, right? That's the part, I don't want to say the hope, because that just sounds like wishy-washy. That's the direction. Go that way now. That's the way to go. We're Perform Better pivoted, and the whole seminar series, the whole summit is free this summer, right? It's completely free, and you can see all the speakers for the first time ever. You can see them all. They figured it out, and they figured it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Very cool. All right, good stuff. Alwyn, thanks for coming on, as always.
See you next time.
Welcome to the Functional Movement System segment. I'm Geralyn Coopersmith, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series on what to expect when implementing an FMS-based approach in your facility. Last time in part 1, I spoke about the importance of overcoming trainer resistance and getting trainer buy-in. Today in part 2, I'd like to discuss the importance of getting management buy-in. Depending on the size and structure of your organization, this might actually be the first step in implementing an FMS-based approach in your facilities. But regardless of where this falls in your launch roadmap, in order to have a significant cultural and operational shift to a movement-based approach, you'll need to get your senior leadership team on board with this initiative. If your leadership is comprised of individuals who come from a fitness or performance background, you can use many of the same tactics that I described in part 1 of this series to get them on board with what you're doing. However, if your leadership team is comprised of people who come from more of a pure business or financial background, you'll need to take a different approach. In my experience implementing FMS at both Equinox and Nike, there are 3 keys to getting management buy-in, specifically building the business case, baking it into the marketing plans, and working across departments. Often, particularly in larger organizations, the people at the top are MBAs or CPAs. They may also be fitness enthusiasts, but they're not likely steeped in the science the way we as professionals are. That said, for this audience, it's important to speak the language of business by answering the question, how is this initiative ultimately going to make more money for the company? What is the ROI, return on investment, for this initiative? FMS is a powerful tool for personal training sales, member retention, trainer retention, all of which can significantly impact a company's bottom line. The FMS screening and prescription process demonstrates to the member that they're getting a higher level of service, greater customization, and a more educated professional delivering that service. It also provides the member with new information about their functioning and fitness. Offering free screenings to members on site, potential new facility members off site, are both powerful sales tools for showcasing trainer value, creating professional relationships, and decreasing consumer concerns about purchasing ancillary services or joining your facility. When presenting this initiative to senior leaderships, you should identify some business KPIs, key performance indicators, that you're going to track and measure over time to quantify the impact this new approach is making to the bottom line. Make an educated guess about how your efforts will impact things like sales, member retention, session utilization, trainer ramp-up, and trainer turnover. Try to connect your KPIs to areas that you know are important to the short and long-term strategic objectives of the company. Keep in mind that revenue is the language these leaders speak. They will likely not be swayed by arguments about why this is better for the consumer from a program design point of view, because at the end of the day, that is not what they as leaders have to be accountable for to their ownership, their investors, or stockholders. Another key to getting management buy-in is working with your marketing professionals to bake the idea of an FMS-informed approach into their campaigns and strategies. Whether your marketing team is one person working part-time or a much larger dedicated team, it's vitally important to get them engaged with the paradigm shift to a movement-based approach as early as possible. Invite marketing people to your trainer trainings, screen them, prescribe correctives, and rescreen them. Explain to them the higher level of customization that can be provided to members with this approach. Help them understand that this approach demonstrates a higher level of expertise and professionalism in the training staff. Get member testimonials that they can use in marketing collateral. Partner with them to ensure that this movement-based, FMS-driven approach is highlighted in both evergreen sales materials and in specific seasonal promotions and campaigns. For example, if there's a Get in Shape for Ski Season promotion, work with marketing to include how FMS can identify issues with the way people move, improve that movement, and help them do more of what they love to do, in this case, skiing. Marketing is the megaphone for the organization. By being a great partner for that team's specific needs, you set your team up for greater success in the long term. Lastly, make sure you're looping in other internal teams within the organization and allied health professionals outside of your organization on what you're doing. An FMS-based approach can be the proverbial tide by which all boats rise if you do it in an integrated way. If you have or work with massage therapists, chiropractors, physical therapists, invite them to formal or informal sessions that you have. Meet with them to discuss how FMS can create a common language where everyone is on the same page doing what's in the best interest of the client. One call out is that failing to do this can potentially undermine the long-term success of your program. If other professionals don't understand what you're doing and say or do things that go against the corrective strategies that you're trying to implement, it can create doubt and confusion in the minds of the members and impair your ability to make progress with them. Having other professionals engaged in your program strengthens your referral network and ensures a seamless experience for the members to achieve the best results possible. Next time in part 3 of this 3-part series on what to expect when implementing an FMS-based approach in your facility, I'll be talking about the importance of empowering your trainers to take ownership. I'm Geralyn Coopersmith, and that's it for today's Functional Movement System segment. For more information, please check out functionalmovement.com.
Hey, this is Adam.
This is Tim.
Welcome to the TrainHeroic Data-Driven Coaching segment. So,
let's go.
Tim, you were reading an article today, kind of raised a good topic for us, which was on the topic of queuing.
Yeah, it's one that, I think a lot of coaches, more tenured coaches have a good idea on how to give athletes or their clients really good cues, but it's interesting that it keeps coming up. And I figured we could shed some light on, how much cueing is appropriate, what type of cues there are, and maybe some strategies that we can give folks to make their cues a little bit better for their folks.
Sure. I think we've probably all gone through that stage where we knew a lot and we wanted to tell people all about it.
Totally.
I think most experienced coaches have gotten out of the fire hose of knowledge stage.
Yeah.
But I think there's still there's a balancing act there to play. And for me, I'm definitely more of the philosophy. I'm teaching a new movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where it gets we get really over cueing a lot of times.
Totally.
Right? Is I'm not afraid to demonstrate, give a cue or two, have them try it, and then correct what needs to be corrected. And, the human body, human brain is pretty good for most people. You work with people for whom this isn't true, but pretty good at solving motor challenges, right? If you know what it's supposed to look like, with a little bit extra guidance, you can usually get it pretty right. And, at first you're not having them do it maximally to begin with anyway. Yeah. And so, that's I don't think, you have to worry that much if you're teaching something. I'm going to teach you how to squat today. Well, you're going to goblet squat a 15-pound dumbbell. I'm not concerned about that.
Totally. And I'm guilty of that too. And I think a lot of young coaches are I feel like I have to bring validity to the table, right? I know what I'm talking about. This is how this is going to happen. These are the biomechanics. This is why we're doing it. And the athlete is just Coach, where do we start? And, you were right. I think a lot of coaches kind of grow out of that phase and we focus more on what's important now. And for me, Adam, especially with a new athlete, it all starts with why we're doing it. And these are, we'll dive in here a little bit. I'm talking about internal cues here. So what the feeling should be when you're squatting or when you're benching or when you're deadlifting, why it's important. So how your body should feel when you're executing that movement. And as those folks kind of become more adept, then we can kind of localize our coaching and get into more external cues. I don't know, how you've kind of operated in your coaching, but that's where I start usually with those internally driven things. How does this feel for you? And that gives them a little bit of a why behind the movement.
Yeah, for the most part, I think I used to shy away from internal cues a lot. And what happens, I'm talking, this is more of my Gen Pop experience would be, you end up with a lot of questions on why or what they're supposed to feel.
Good point.
So if I had done that at first and given them the internal cue of okay, so this is a squat. I know why we're doing a squat or a lunge.
Right.
But it's it's a quad exercise. I mean, if that's one reason, right? There are several reasons you could do that. But you're probably going to feel your quads. That's the case. That's the kind of question you end up with if you don't address it initially. And so there is a natural curiosity in that type of person. Some people are not like that, to understand what they should be feeling so they know whether they're succeeding in that case, right?
Yeah, that's good.
And then, as they learn, as the mechanics are good, I'm satisfied, by my criteria, and they feel confident, right? Oh, I'm doing it. Then you change the focus to an external one more. So it's now I want you to actually move the weight fast on the way up. I want you to, we're going to add weight to the bar. I just want you to drive it or, add a heavier kettlebell or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so the focus becomes more on performance after you have kind of basic skill acquisition and confidence in the athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're talking about higher level athletes, I bring up the golf example a lot on this podcast, but it's Tiger Woods isn't going through his golf swing thinking about these are my wrists, this is my shoulder, this is my hip, here now my knee's coming through, here we go. They're just not thinking about that. They have those internal cues already built in. So, that coaching is taken to the next level when now you can, talk about specifics about the wrist or the biomechanics of, driving that elbow to your side, whatever specific golf stuff you want to do. It doesn't matter what the sport is. But generally that's how I do it. And if I'm giving external cues, Adam, I don't overload the athlete, right? I give them one on a set, and then maybe on the next set I move into another cue, and I kind of tie those things together to create a story. It makes it a little bit easier for that athlete to understand. That's just a strategy that works for me.
I move pretty quickly towards external cues. I personally feel they ultimately produce better results for most people.
Yeah.
There are some reasons to use internal cues, in certain situations for sure. My experience, after injury coming back to focus on not compensating, right? Then you have to watch for these weight shifts and, maybe you have to make sure the injured leg is doing its job somehow, that kind of thing. But,
totally.
In a healthy person who's got the right idea of how to do it, now the focus kind of shifts more to an external focus for me.
Yeah, there'll always be people that are outliers and need kind of different help than the majority of your folks. Just got to know your people, queue them up.
That's going to do it for us today. Go to trainherlock.com, start a 14-day free trial. We've got some built-in programs in there to help you get started real easy today. And we got pricing as low as $9.99, so any type of coach can get started.
All right, now it's time for the Body by BoyleOnline.com. Hit the gym with the strength coach segment. Become an insider to Mike Boyle's strength and conditioning with staff meetings, in-services, and complete access to the MBSC programs. Check it out at bodybyboyleonline.com. All right, today I have on John Welbourn. He's a former 9-year NFL starter, CEO of the Power Athlete. He also created the online training phenomenon, Johnny Wad. He was drafted the 97th pick in 1999 NFL draft, went on to be a starter for the Philadelphia Eagles from 99 to 2003. And over the course of his career, started over 100 games with 10 playoff appearances, was a 4-year letterman while playing football at University of Berkeley, California, Berkeley, and graduated with a bachelor's degree in rhetoric, which is also a very fine bourbon. I'm not sure if the two have anything to do with each other. We'll find out more. He's worked with all kinds of athletes, MLB, NFL, NHL, Olympic, and military, and he travels the world lecturing on performance and nutrition for Power Athlete and Fuse Move. John, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, I told you before, I always love when I get to speak to somebody who, played a sport at such a high level his whole life and then is now kind of really imparting that wisdom and that knowledge from a training perspective, because I think, somebody like you we can all learn from not the mistakes, but the experience that you've had, and I read a couple of your articles that like so interesting about the stuff that you've been through. So, but I want to start out with Power, because you are the CEO of Power Athlete, and I think we've seen this shift over the last bunch of years where the traditional idea of power has not change. Obviously the science isn't going to change, but like, for example, we don't see as many coaches teaching Olympic athletes, Olympic weightlifting. So, some of the cleans, the snatches, et cetera, or the full gamut. So talk to us about what that means for you. You're the CEO of Power Athlete. I want to talk about what that means for you and basically how you express that through the training.
Yeah, I always looked at power being really a subset of strength, and your ability to display your strength dynamically is how I identify power. So if I can move weight, 1 RM from point A to point B, or an individual from point A to point B, how far I move them might be my strength, but how far I sprint through them, how hard I hit them, and the force I can develop is really how I understand power. And for me, if I take a walk down memory lane, I was 14 years old when I first really started lifting weights. And about that time, I got approached by a guy named George Zangus, who is an old power lifter in our neighborhood. And he used to coach and work with a bunch of kids. Those are the high school kids that looked like they had a bit of a future. He kind of would take them under the wing, and we would train in his garage. And I remember one time I think I was squatting or doing something. And he made a kind of a joke. He's like, man, you lift real slow and careful. And nobody had ever really said anything to me about it. I just kind of assumed you put weight on your back and you kind of gingerly squat down and squat up and try not to hurt yourself. And I was like, is there another way to do it? And he's like, don't lift weights like old people have sex, slow and careful. I want you to be violent with the weights, and I want you to try to break the barbell every time you touch them. And then he talked about his good friend, Dr. Fred Hatfield, Dr. Squat. And we talked about compensatory acceleration that day. The idea that as mechanical advantage increases, so does bar speed. And if you can take a little bit of that, idea of compensatory acceleration from the weight room and transition on the field, you'll be a pretty good football player. So from that moment on, anytime I touched a barbell, I was trying to move it as violently as possible, to the point where I'd go lift weights with people and they'd be like, dude, like, you're going to try to hurt yourself. And I'm like, not me, the weights. I'm going to try to break these things. So then when I went to go play football, I took that same approach of as mechanical advantage, so does speed. So then as I went to punch a guy or I went to hit him, I was always trying to shoot my hands or punch through the individual or drive my head through the individual. And it just, that kind of reckless abandon that I learned as a young kid ended up probably being one of the most pivotal elements of my entire NFL career. So, and when I would talk to people about compensatory acceleration and how I trained and the idea and the way that I took it out onto the field, people just would kind of look at me with kind of crazy eyes and be like, wait, what? And I had this really interesting observation years ago where I saw guys that were really strong in the weight room, but yet they couldn't transition it onto the field. So, I mean, years ago, we talked about, look like Tarzan, play like Jane, that there was a difference between weight room strong and field strong. Hence, one of the reasons that one of our programs is called Field Strong is because, weight room strong looks pretty good and maybe gets some, accolades or, the admiration of your friends. But at the end of the day, all that training, if you can transition it onto the field, it becomes kind of useless. So strength is important, and it's really the platform on which everything's built on. But your ability to display that strength dynamically in a violent nature on the football field in such a way that allows you to become, a lethal weapon is what allows you to play for a long time in the NFL. And when I looked at my training, the things that allowed me to sharpen my blade and be the most lethal of individuals is what I tended to gravitate towards.
I love that. Let's expand on compensatory acceleration. I know Coach Boyle has talked a lot about, and I think this is why he loved the Olympic lifts so much, because for him, I feel like there's a time to lift weights fast and there's a time to grind through them. And I think he never loved lifting some of the, like, for example, like a bench press, with speed. So he didn't feel like they were meant for that. So talk to us about when you say compensatory acceleration, do you mean really like almost all the lifts, and how much are you doing it? Do you do it all the time? Just give us an example of how you're programming that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I used to lift, when I was warming up with 135, I lifted 135 like it was 500. So I always prepped that, and there was never a point where I was anything ever slow and careful. I was always violently attacking the weights. And that's just what worked for me at that point. And the thing I liked about Olympic lifting, and really the power variant or variations of the lift, like the power clean, the power snatch, one, it was a longer pull, and two, you can't do it slowly. It's like trying to jump up on a box slowly. Like, you have to be explosive, you have to be dynamic, and you have to be violent with great intent. And I think what happens with a lot of people, and what I've seen, and I've been trained, with the world's best people for my NFL career. And then when I retired, and, since then I've taught hundreds of seminars around the globe. And the one thing that's universal is people lack intent. When they put their hands on a barbell or a med ball or whatever it looks like in the weight room, they kind of go into it with almost this glassy eyed, like just kind of turn their brains off. Whereas I had very focused intent on exactly what I wanted to do at each time. If I was trying to break the barbell, I tried to break the barbell. If I was trying to throw the med ball through the wall, I was going to try to throw it through the wall. So I think for a lot of athletes, they just kind of almost like passengers in the car, where you're kind of listening to music and they kind of zone out, and next thing you know, you're at where you want to be and you get out of the car. I was in the car, knowing where I was going, speeding from stoplight to stoplight with great intent, and testing the tires at every turn. So that worked for me, and I really enjoyed Olympic lifting. But at the end of the day, there became this really interesting misconception that the only way you can develop power and the only way you can develop athleticism is through the Olympic lifts. And I don't know if that's an influence by CrossFit or where that came from, but I was pretty explosive and pretty dynamic and pretty violent before I ever started Olympic lifting, and it gravitated towards it. But towards the end of my, I would say for the majority of my NFL career, I didn't really Olympic lift. I didn't pull a deadlift off the ground. I just did RDLs. We squatted, we jumped. We did a ton of unilateral work with lunging, single leg squats, ton of pull-ups. And if we were going to bench, I was going to try to fucking bench the world. So it worked pretty well.
Yeah, I would say so. So I love this idea of intention. I'm certified originally in the early 2000s by ISSA. And so Dr. Fred Hatfield was obviously the founder of that. And so learned a lot about that. It's funny, I just did a video for golfers the other day on that idea, the intention, because I see a lot of people slamming a ball or especially throwing it like a rotational throw. And it's nice and casual, especially that's why I hate those rebounders, because I feel like the rebounder, everybody's worried about catching it. And they're not going to have that full expression of the power. And it's the same thing with some of the jumps. Like when you're coming back, you want to go as fast as you can. But let's transition that too. Then, are you using a lot of plyos and a lot of med balls with your programs? And for me, I do feel like that, especially because I work with golfers, and a lot of times they tend to be a little bit older, 40s and older, and I'm trying to get some of that athleticism back. And I feel like the med balls and the jumps are two amazing ways, safe ways to do that. So talk to us about, how much you're using plyos and med balls and how you feel like that translates to athleticism.
Yeah, no, I used, I'm a student of Charlie Francis, and, Charlie's conditioning stuff with med balls really was super influential on me, but like plyometric movements were always a foundation of my training. So, we did a ton of, bilateral heavy work, not only with back squats and jumps, but a lot of post-activation potentiation. I mean, Cal Dietz calls it French contrast, but that was like probably one of the staples in my training, do something heavy, then do something dynamic and something fast. I use a ton of med balls and plyometrics in all of our programs almost every single day. The other one that I did a lot of is I did a lot of conditioning with jump rope. So not, kind of the CrossFit style, just doing double unders, but, 500 single jumps and just different techniques and different patterns. And I thought that was excellent for the conditioning and also for foot speed and hand and eye coordination. But I also come from like so I got into martial arts when I was 6 and about 10 years old. I got into some kickboxing stuff, but I thought kicking was stupid, and then I just got into boxing. And so a lot of the skills and a lot of the conditioning and a lot of the training, with not only, hand-eye coordination and being able to cut a guy off in the ring actually ended up paying pretty good dividends to playing in the NFL.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to go kind of off topic here. I heard in another interview your dad really didn't want you to lift weights. So you were doing martial arts, though. Where was that coming from?
So when my older brother, I'm the youngest of 3 boys. My older brother is 6 years older than me. So when my brother was 12, he got beat up by some kid who was kind of a bully in the neighborhood. And my dad wasn't much of a fighter. And so, straight up 1980s Karate Kid theme. My dad took us to this down the street to this local dojo where a neighbor had a little martial arts place and enrolled my older brother. And after about 2 weeks of him coming home and practicing on my other brother and I, my dad just took all 3 of us. And I think I was 6, my brother Eddie was 9, and my brother Rob was 12. And, he ended up learning enough to, defend himself and, punch the bully right in the solar plexus or something. I forgot how the story went exactly. And then he kind of peeled off, and my brother Ed and I stayed in it. And when my brother Eddie got to high school, he ended up kind of quitting because he wanted to play tennis and football. And I just continued doing it. And then I remember I had seen, how was it? Yeah, the style was called Shotokan. It was like a pretty traditional Japanese. And I remember watching like a bunch of like Benny the Jet Urigas and, John Barrett had a kickboxing academy. And it was the only place kind of around us that actually had a ring. So I went down and enrolled, and I did some kickboxing. And then finally I got to the point where I was like, do you have anything where I don't have to kick anybody? I just want to punch. And so then I got into some boxing at that point. And then when I got to high school, those skills were pretty good. And then when I went to Berkeley, we trained pretty religiously with the Cal boxing team in the off season. So it was something I really enjoyed.
That's very cool. Listening to Greg Rose and the Titleist Performance Institute youth training program, they talk about a lot of this idea of windows, training windows, and this idea about speed early on. So the speed window, there's this speed window early on. So something like martial arts, or like when you say, okay, we're going to hit a ball, we're going to hit it, same thing, going back to this idea about intention, hit it as hard as you can. Swing that golf club as hard as you can. Try to hit a home run every single time when they're 7, 8, 9, because there's that open window. I wonder if that's where also you probably trained, and I'm not sure how old you are. I would assume about 10 years. You're in your early 40s? Yeah. So when I was a kid, there was always kids on the street. We played every sport. We're always running around, always trying to win. And the thing was we kind of developed this great athleticism and was easier to develop that speed window. I'm wondering if that martial arts had something to do with, your fast twitch muscle fiber development.
Probably. I mean, I was always a pretty big kid. Like I think I was 6 foot 165 when I was 14. So I was always pretty tall. And I remember I was pretty fast. This was kind of if you've listened to any of our stories, I had this really interesting moment where I was pretty fast in elementary school. And then when I got to middle school, I grew a bunch and I was super uncoordinated. And I remember we had this, back in the day, PE was graded, and they graded us on not only our sports prowess, but we also had a series of timed runs, and we had to come within a certain time to get a grade. And I remember my sixth grade year, I got an A in PE, smashed everything. And then my would have been my seventh grade year, I actually grew a bunch. And all of a sudden I was getting C's and D's on these runs. And I remember being so mortified that I was going to get a C, or, because I ended up being pretty good at the sports, but I just wasn't fast anymore. And I remember telling my mom, I'm like, hey, Mom, I'm not fast anymore. There has to be something wrong. I don't know what it is, but is there a coach or somebody that could work with me? And so my mom was like, yeah, that makes sense. And I remember she talked to my dad. My dad was like, we're not hiring him a speed coach. And so I went and talked to my teacher. And she's like, I don't know how to help you, but if you want to run extra after school, I'll let you do some extra credit runs, and you can get more points and, get a better grade in PE. So I just did that, and I just did extra credit runs. I remember telling my mom I had to study late on Friday afternoon, and I would just go and do these extra credit runs every Friday, trying to get my average up so I could get more points. So, because I was kind of embarrassed to come home with anything other than an A in PE. And that was pretty universal for me, where I sometimes think one of the greatest motivating factors for any athlete is a little bit of shame. The idea that I'm not good enough, being made fun of, or not feeling like you're the best, I think is a pretty powerful motivator. And I remember that feeling of not getting a good grade and not being fast enough, or going and playing football and, never having lifted weights and walking in the weight room and seeing other people dramatically stronger than me, and this feeling of a little bit of shame and embarrassment, why aren't I stronger? How come I'm, not understanding the physiology of it now. But at the time, being upset, how come these kids are way stronger than me? Have they been lifting weights? How come I haven't been lifting weights? And I remember when I talked to my dad about, hey, Dad, I really want to lift weights. His comment was what do you want to do that? Idiots do that. It's counting 10, 1 to 10 over and over again. And I remember thinking I knew that there was something there that the reason I was not fast anymore could be fixed in the weight room. And now that I understand, inter and intermuscular coordination and rate coding and all the other physiology, I was onto something even at 13 or 14 years old, that, that wiring, that efficiency, a lot of the problems that I was going through in terms of a big growth spurt and getting bigger and understanding, intrinsic, under a training model, I think would have been really helped with, just a basic barbell program. And I think that's just a kind of a matriculation, maturation process. And yeah, it's just, it's really interesting to look back on this stuff, 20, 30 years later and see man, I was even onto something back then. Just, probably encounter people that think you're a 14-year-old kid and don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah. I don't know though, but back then in the early 90s, I don't know how good the programs would have been though. Anything would have helped though.
Yeah, I mean, I remember our freshman year of high school, when I walked in the weight room, they had us all max out the first day. So nobody had ever touched weights. Oh. And we all had to max out with 1 RM so that we could get a place to use percentages. And so what you see in a lot of the power athlete programs is not only good training, but a lot of it is written in such a way to counteract a lot of the ignorance and just stupidity that I saw my entire life through training. To ask a 14-year-old kid that's never lifted weights to max out a 1 RM is probably the single worst thing that you could do for that individual, not only for confidence, but for every other reason. I mean, there's and this is part of the development in power athlete with the training life cycle, understanding that, a novice walks in day one, having never lifted weights, this is his program. And as he progresses, he hits this milestone and gets to different ones. And the reason being is when I was playing the NFL, you're kind of stuck in this bubble where your friends all play in the NFL, you train at facilities with other NFL players, you work with the world's best, who train you like the world's best. So when I ended up getting out and starting to work with, with athletes, I realized that I had been living on this ivory tower, and the training that I was doing was very specific to who I was, and maybe some, genetic anomaly and just a lot of things. And I remember people talking to me about hey, what did you do for your training? I'd love to do your training. And I remember telling a guy one time, why would you want to do my training? One, you're not me. You're not 6'5", 300 pounds. You didn't squat 600 plus at 19 and bench 500 at 22 and vert 34 inches and run a 4.9 at 300 pounds and play in the NFL for 10 years. Not to fucking trump card you, but like you need to do a training program that matches where you are in your training life cycle and who you are as an individual. And when I looked at a lot of the training programs out there, everything from 531 and all these different programs, they were kind of intermediate level programs. Really, the only program that I saw that was kind of a beginner was Mark Ripto's Starting Strength, where he talked about the novice athlete being able to progress. And from that, I realized that, hey, there's these beginner, intermediate, and advanced programs based on, how long you are within this, how long you've been training, what numbers you've hit, how far you are on this journey. And I think that's what's really set Power Athlete apart from most companies, was the ability to identify these different stages and then tune up the right training at the right time to continue to drive adaptation.
Yeah, I think what sets you apart as well is a lot of athletes that we see that come into this game kind of to have this is how I did it attitude, where you're talking about really the opposite. Like, no, you can't compare yourself to my genetics and my experience. So we see a lot of that, and it's like, oh, come on, man, you're going to kill these people. And there does have to be a little bit more thought involved.
Well, somebody once said you fail at the margins of your experience. So if you want to extend the margin, you have to extend your experience. And I think what happens is a lot of people reach a point, and that's where their experience or their mental experience just kind of hits a roadblock, and that's where it ends. And this is the way to do it. And I think having the opportunity to go play in the NFL for a decade and work with some really good coaches, and then come out and train a lot of people that aren't professional athletes, you kind of see like I remember for the first 2 years, I was confused. I'm like, why can't people do this stuff?
Yeah.
And I remember Rafael Ruiz, who was the guy that trained me in my NFL career. I talked to Rafa one time, and I was like, hey, like these are simple tasks. Like, why can't people do this? And he's like, dude, you got to remember, man, not everybody's a professional athlete the way you're wired. And the problem is, if you look through your lens, you will forever discount everything people doing. You have to switch it, kind of almost like put yourself off in the corner and then look at it through a different lens. And he goes, if you can do that, man, you can train anybody. He goes, the problem that most professional athletes or people that have a lot of success is they can't get off of their ivory tower. They can't empathize and put themselves in position of another person. You meet a 40-year-old father who's, never lifted weights and never trained, and hey, I want to come lift weights with you guys. And you're like, man, this is all I've been doing since I've been 14 years old. And not only have I used this stuff, but I used it to play at the highest level and make a pretty good living. So it wasn't like just a fucking hobby. This is what I use. This is how I sharpen my blade to effectively go out and beat up the toughest dudes on the planet.
Yeah, I think it also translates to something you said before as well. And I find that this can also be a problem. This is motivation idea. You were motivated by some of that shame you were talking about, right? And a lot of people might go the other way and say, oh, I can't lift like those guys, or, oh man, they feel uncomfortable in there. We have to, like you just said as well, empathize with that group as well, because not everybody's going to take that situation and turn it into a motivating factor and drive themselves even harder. It's something we need to look out for as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it was about me where, like if I wasn't good at something, or I felt like somebody was better than me, like there was no discouragement. Like I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to kick a can home, or, like the box boy with a sad day. It was okay, you're better than me today, but you're not going to be better than me tomorrow. And that little bit of shame or not feeling like I was good enough. I remember, when I was a freshman and I never had played football, I was pretty big and, had boxed. And so I knew how to fight. I just didn't know how to play football. And I remember I think I played the first game at like defensive line. And I remember my coach like, how'd you play? I'm like, well, I played fine, but like, I don't really enjoy that position that much. And he's like, well, what do you enjoy? I'm like, I kind of like the offensive line stuff because I get to come off the ball and road grade people and hit them. And I know where the ball's going, and I get off on the snap count, and I don't have to react as much. I can just kind of like get on a track and go. And the next game I ended up playing both ways, and which I was not conditioned for. And, I didn't play that well. And instead of being like, oh, I can only play one way, I was like, I just need to be in better shape. I need to be able to do this. And There was never a point where I felt like, like I think people associate shame with something being bad. I think shaming somebody and sometimes, not feeling like you're good enough is a powerful motivator, at least for me. And I don't know, maybe it's a change in who we are, or maybe it's a change in different generations where now we're so nervous of making people feel inadequate. Whereas for me, if I hadn't have felt that, I don't know if I would have been motivated in the same way. I wasn't necessarily motivated for greatness. I want to have this, go play in the NFL and have this illustrious career. No, I just didn't want to lose. And I wanted to feel like I was the strongest dude, and I wasn't. And that wasn't going to be the end game, and I was going to work hard to be able to be the person that I knew I could be, or the person I imagined myself to be. And I think I always felt like I had an opportunity or some greatness or something to live up to. And it was just a matter of doing the work. So it's kind of strange for me where I run into people and they were like, oh, I felt bad and I never went back. Like the guy that goes to the gym and somebody says something to him and makes them feel bad about themselves. And so what do? They go to McDonald's and, get $100 worth of food and never go back to the gym. I was the person where if somebody said something, I'd be like, what time are you training tomorrow? Great, I'll be here tomorrow. So I just, even from a young age, I just had this opportunity or just this different mindset.
Absolutely. I also wonder, I know obviously there was this other idea about your education too, like your parents really pushed that and that was instilled in you as well. Obviously you went to Berkeley, which is, a safety school, but it's okay. Right. But, seriously, obviously the education was important to you. You didn't want to have a C. That was instilled in you as well. And I wonder if that absolutely made you certainly made you more well-rounded and kind of transferred into the sports as well.
Yeah, no, my dad was, my dad passed away a couple of years ago, but my dad was super smart, really, really sharp. He graduated when he was 16, actually graduated 2 grades ahead, went to college, graduated at 19, graduated USC Law School in his early 20s, and, ended up being a practicing, literally a bar passed courtroom, court attorney that did, ugly murder one, big felony stuff for over 55 years. So my dad was really sharp. And that was something that was always very important in our family. Not necessarily the education, but more to be intelligent, to be well-read, and to not be a dumbass. My dad was, the sports was great at the end of the day, but he wasn't going to raise dumb sons. And I think, the other thing, my dad he was pretty sharp, but he was also very condescending in a lot of ways. Now that he's since passed away, I've realized it a lot more. But that condescending nature, and it just really was kind of a good driver for me. Whereas I remember when I took a bunch of, I got a bunch of scholarship offers, and I ended up taking trips to SC, UCLA, Colorado, and Nebraska. And I remember when I was coming down to where I was going to go, he made a good point to me. He's like, football is going to end one day. What degree do you want to hang on your wall for, the rest of your life? And I didn't want to go to USC. It was too close. UCLA was kind of too close to home. I grew up in, Palos Verdes area in South Bay. And I didn't necessarily want to hang a degree from Colorado. Nobody's impressed by that one. And I don't even think Nebraska prints their degrees. I think they're done in Crayolas. And Berkeley seemed like a good place. And I remember our next door neighbor growing up who was an orthopedic surgeon. He had gone to Berkeley. And I remember one time my mom was saying, he was a really, really sharp dude. My mom making a point that, Dr. Wilson was really sharp. He went to Berkeley. That's where all the really smart people go. So when I got the chance, I was I remembered that and thought, man, that's where all the really smart people go. This is where I'll go to be challenged. And I didn't really have any aspirations of playing pro football. I just wanted to go there and get a degree and maybe get a chance to go to law school. And when I got there, free school paid for, I got, preferred admissions, I got, a dorm room, I got all this really cool stuff. And I was more excited with the opportunity to be able to go to Berkeley and go in and compete academically. And I figured I'd just play some football and get a good degree and go on and live my life. And then all of a sudden, the guys that I'm playing against every day in practice are all getting drafted first and second round. And all of a sudden, it becomes more of a reality.
Yeah. And that almost didn't happen. I want you to talk about your ACL story. I love this story. You kind of interesting, something I found out through your story about this idea about some people can actually play. 1/3 of the people can actually play through. I think you were called a coper. But let's talk about the ACL, because you ended up having bad rehab, and then you had good rehab, and obviously you ended up getting drafted. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. Like my senior year of high school, and it's funny since we created the ACL course and I started talking and thinking about on it, a bunch of stuff kind of came to light. But I was a senior in high school. I was over at my buddy's house, and he had this kind of upstairs tree fort. And I remember and he had a killer view of like all of LA. He was up on the hill in Miller-Leste. And we were up there in the tree fort. And as I was climbing, like I forgot what we were doing, like just kind of viewing, like, man, I think he might even been, I wasn't smoking a cigar, but I think he was smoking a cigar. So he wanted to go up there to smoke cigars. And as I was climbing down, the final rung, as I put my right leg on it, broke. And I drove my leg straight into the ground, and I felt a big pop in my knee. And I remember instantly my knee got pretty sore and tight. And I remember I just got in my car and I drove home. And when I got home, my older brother was there. He was home for the summer. And I was like, dude, I think I messed my knee up. And it was pretty swollen. And so we got in the pool, and my brother just started doing this, like he was pumping water, just as kind of like trying to get motion out of it. And we did that for like a bunch of, like maybe an hour or two. And then I iced it. We got back in the pool, and kind of after 3 days, all the swelling had gone away. And about a week after that, I went to go play in the Shrine game, which was in the high school, North versus South Shrine game. And they put me through a full physical. And I remember I told the guy, I'm like, I kind of hurt my knee. Can you check it out? And he did the old test. And he's like, it feels a little bit lax, but it's definitely not torn. So I just went on, played in the Shrine game, went to Cal and played, and never really had any issues other than maybe some tendonitis. So I started noticing I was getting tendonitis in that knee. And then I think it was my third year, maybe we were playing, man, it must have been in October. We were playing a game, and I remember I was playing left tackle. And we were running a little like a counter tray where I block down and the guard pulls. My coach is like, hey, instead of blocking down, I want you to throw your head in front. I want you to do a reverse hip block where you basically throw your head and then you throw your hips and you kind of roll up the dude. And it's kind of a dirty move. It's not outlawed at the time, but it's kind of a cheap thing to do. So my coach was like, I want you to reverse hip that guy. And I was like, oh shit, okay. So I threw my head in front and went to roll him, but I kind of miscalculated. And when I threw my head in front, the guy kneed me square in the forehead and knocked me unconscious. And I got up and continued to play and pretty much played the rest of the game. And then probably about like 2 series before the end of the game, I remember coming out and being like, man, I think something's wrong. And then they, basically evaluated me as having a concussion. And I was done for that game. And so I was out maybe like, I didn't play that week. And then the next week I came back. And they had a play where it was like a reverse play where we all blocked down, and then I pulled around, and the quarterback was going to do this kind of fake reverse. And as I was running the open field, I just slipped, like my knee just gave out and I fell down, and my knee was hurting pretty bad. They went in, they drained the knee, and because I had a bunch of swelling on it, there was no bloods in the fluid. So they were like, oh, you didn't tear your ACL. And after a couple weeks, the swelling came back and they couldn't get the swelling out of the knee. So they figured I had a torn meniscus. So I went in for surgery, and the doctor opened me up, and I had a torn meniscus, but I had no ACL. So I woke up that next morning after the surgery, and they had done a reconstruction, middle third of the patellar tendon, and it was kind of crappy because if I had known that I had a torn ACL, I would have gone to my professors and tried to take tests early, or I would have done something to some way to kind of manage the rest of that semester. I wake up with an ACL tear, and I'm in the CPM 20 hours a day. I can hardly get around, and I had to. All of a sudden, now we're like in November, and getting ready to take finals. So I was like 2 weeks out of ACL reconstruction, crutching around to get to these finals that I didn't study for, and I ended up not doing all that well. I think I got like at that point I had like over a 3.6 GPA, and then I think that semester I probably averaged out at about a 2.4, which ended up pulling me down right around a 3.0. And I was pretty upset about that. But that was if they had told me, hey, you tore your ACL, you're going into reconstruction, what I probably would have done is pushed it off, taken all my finals early, and then had it done. But I didn't have that option, so I was pretty pissed about that.
Now, when you rehab this, when you went back, you didn't really have the best rehab. You said, right? It wasn't great, and then it wasn't until you got a new strength coach that came in and kind of redid had these new protocols. Tell us a little bit about what those protocols were.
Yeah, I remember the rehab we did was pretty crappy. The coaches were really driving it, and they had like this idea of when they wanted hey, you tore your ACL here, you should be fine by training camp. And I remember, the way they had me squatting and just a lot of the movements they had me doing, I know now to be incorrect. They were trying to have me sit back with a vertical shin. There was, didn't want us to squat anywhere below parallel, because obviously squatting below parallel is bad for your knee. There was just a ton of stuff. And I remember my knee just didn't respond. And like, for conditioning, they used to make us run the stadiums. And I remember just like endlessly running these stadiums. And like all that would happen is my knee would get so hot, I like would just get in the ice and like I couldn't bend it for like 2 hours, 3 hours. And it was just a really shitty rehab protocol. It was done by a bunch of ACTs that had a little knowledge of PT, but I think, guys wearing numerous hats and just, it wasn't done well. And then I still had a bunch of knee issues going into that junior year. And I think that kind of hurt my draft status a little bit. And then they fired the strength coach and they brought in a guy named Todd Rice, who was a big Olympic lifting, it was basically snatch, clean and jerk, press, push, press. It was, anything what you'd seen from away from a traditional program. I mean, I only front squatted. And all of a sudden, we're squatting in Ollie shoes and, we're talking about positive shin angle and getting the knee over the toe and plyometrics and sprinting and, everything that ended up becoming really the basis of my programming for the rest of my NFL career and the rest of my life. I learned in that first year. And all of a sudden, like things that I hadn't been able to do because of the injury, all of a sudden I had tendonitis, it went away. All of a sudden, when I front squatted 500 pounds, my vert was over 30 inches and I was able to sprint and run. And it was just, it was the right guy at the right time, and it just allowed me to really go out and play and do well. So it was probably almost a year and a half later before that whole kind of everything fixed itself, and I finally felt I was fine.
Yeah, that's amazing. Todd Rice coming in and things changed. But let's be honest, it's really your brother who saved your career. He didn't go to work that day, man. I mean, that's a good brother.
Yeah, no, my brother has been not only one of my greatest coaches and best friends, but both my older brothers played college football, and my brother knew enough about knee injuries. And I remember asking him one time, like, I tore my ACL. He's like, no, I just knew you had a lot of swelling, and I knew that they do a bunch of pool rehab stuff, so we'll just get on that one. So
yeah. That's interesting. Now, so talk to me about, you have the ACL injury prevention program, and Coach Boyle always says, he questions, is ACL prevention just good training? Talk to us about what you're talking about in your online course right now that you have.
Yeah, I mean, we found a couple, key kind of similar threads. One talked about ligament dominance. The other one talked about muscle dominance and, why certain athletes are more prone to others. And what we wanted to do was not only put a course out that allowed, for good training, which, Mike's dead right, that, good ACL training is good training in general, but also a set of warm-ups and protocols for coaches to use to assess at which risk the athlete is at. So, I mean, we were to look at like the biggest risk population would have to be, teenage girls that, are going through puberty that are doing some form of, ballistic jumping sport, as all of a sudden the hips widen, naturally knock-kneed, and they start getting a bunch of, you see the knee start caving in. So what we wanted to do was not only put a good program out, but put a series of assessments and tests together that coaches could use to kind of monitor where the athlete is on day one, and then here's the training, and then be able to kind of progress and check over time. So we talk a lot about trunk dominance, where people all of a sudden start using their trunk and they can't control their trunk as a mechanism for ACL tears. So we do a lot of trunk work, a lot of rotation, and really just work on, as athletes go to change direction, what looks like proper mechanics, the ability to put the toe in the big toe in the ground, nice vertical foot, knee over the instep, and then how to be able to change direction. And we also found that the glute's a big player, and that big toe in the ground is really that connector and allows the big glute to fire. If they can't put the big toe in the ground, the glute won't fire, which becomes one of your biggest mechanisms for absorbing force and change of direction and a lot of key factors. So it's been good. And really what we wanted was a coach or a parent that could follow the course, come and take it, and then be able to have enough wherewithal to be able to see this stuff happening in real time and say, hey, wait a minute, I saw that in the course. All of a sudden there's some, dynamic, tibial torsion or, this movement, and this is how we test for it. This is how we fix it. And these are the steps we put in place to prevent it. So I think, what is it? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we're just looking to arm people with more information. And I feel like a lot of times people don't learn about the ACL tear until they've either had one themselves or somebody they've coached has it, and then they kind of have to learn it all over again. And the goal is if somebody could take the ACL course and hopefully, be the speeding bullet that passes that off and, cuts it off at the pass, then that's really what we're hoping for.
Excellent. I'll make sure I have a link to that course. Right now, actually, it's 15% off too, so people can get that and check that out. John, I want to finish up with this idea about the life cycle of an athlete, especially somebody, you're in your 40s now, and, you went through, you as a kid, then high school, and then there's all this training, and you become a pro. And maybe not everybody's obviously going to be a pro, but then there's still in their mind, whatever level they get to, then there's this idea, look, now you're not competing, but you're still training, you're still trying to be athletic. Talk to us about maybe some of this cycle and maybe what you would do different, or what you're talking to coaches and athletes now about approaching this cycle.
Yeah, the over 40 athlete is really interesting in that, we really kind of rearranged the paradigm a little bit. I think when you're younger, the idea of like recovery is kind of a secondary thing. I think when you're, high level of conditioning and, playing at a high level, it's almost like the ability to handle load and recover is kind of almost secondary. Like, I want to get all this work done, and it's kind of a secondary thought. I think when you get over 40, all of a sudden the paradigm switches and recovery becomes the biggest issue to really focus on. Two things that happen when you start to age: you lose mitochondrial density and you lose the ability to recruit motor units. So Grindstone, which is the program I developed for kind of the over 40 athlete, is really based on that idea of, creating greater mitochondrial density by building a big aerobic base. And we do that in a lot of different fun ways. And then we work on max motor unit recruitment through, heavy singles, doubles, and triples, and then using a lot of compensatory acceleration with what I call cat work, which is our speed work. The idea that if I can move, a lighter weight or a percentage of a certain weight at a certain speed, I can recruit those motor units that I need to keep everything firing. So the one big question, and what I figured out within my own training and figured this out for years, was I can recover pretty well from intensity. Like if I do some 1RMs or I do some heavier weights for, some lower reps, I can tend to recover pretty good. It's the volume that becomes harder and harder to recover. So, when you look at a lot of programs, all they are is real volume heavy, just a kind of like a lot of light weights and just a lot of volume, because I think people are afraid to have people lift heavier weights because it takes, technique, it takes progression, it takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of art to be able to program somebody into being able to lift heavy weights. And I think most people just don't have an understanding on how to do it because they don't do it themselves. So a lot of our programs, especially that Grindstone program, like, hey, for today, I need to get 5 singles. They don't have to be limit singles, but I need them to be heavy enough where, you start kind of cluing in and start, having to ramp up a little bit. Maybe I got to pull my knee sleeves up and put on a belt. But I found that if I can continue to get my athletes to train heavy, use compensatory acceleration, do a ton of PAP work, a lot of dynamic med ball, a lot of short sprints, and find out big ways to create a big aerobic base, we can usually do some pretty amazing things for the over 40 athlete.
John, what about thinking of that person ahead of time? And what are you thinking when it comes to training youth, high school, college? what direction do you feel like you like to see them go in with that?
For the younger athletes?
Yeah.
I think the one thing which is, and I talked about it earlier in the podcast, is for younger athletes is intent. And a lot of kids, especially at a younger age, when they get into this training thing, they don't really have an intent because nobody's really talked to them about it. Like, what's the outcome we're trying to build? And like, what's the bet we're going to make? What's the information that I have? Like, what are you trying to do with this? If you're just trying to be jacked so you can look good at graduation, we can do that stuff. If you want to be able to, play at the next level or play, college football, what does your height look like? What is your requirements? What are you trying to do? Where are your numbers? And then I think what you have to do is go back and kind of fine tune that stuff a little bit and have a little hierarchy of training. And, I talked about this long ago, that the platform at which all life is built on is strength. The stronger the organism, the better he does at just about everything. It doesn't matter if it's, playing football or racing Indy cars. The stronger individual will usually be the most successful. And when you get into a situation where people of equal strength, really speed becomes the greatest outcome for success. So I think if we can build a good platform with strength and try to get people nice and strong up on, some real basic compound type movements, and then from there, put them into a good speed program so they understand not only linear, but change of direction and understand how to sprint and move in space. I think really from that point, I don't know what else I would do with younger kids. I mean, I get them strong and I like to get them to sprint. And, and at that point, if they can sprint, then we can get them into some more dynamic type movement. But at the end of the day, if I was training 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, it would look like very basic bilateral, hinge type movements, maybe a bench, a lot of pressing, maybe a little bit of unilateral work. And at the end of the day, I would try to get those guys to run as fast as they can everywhere, whether it be uphill, whatever it looks like. I found that the missing recipe, not only in my own training and most people's, is we don't sprint anymore. And it's I hate to say it, but it's hard to be a fat ass and sprint fast.
Yeah.
So if people are always like, oh, I want to lose body weight and I don't feel athletic. I'm like, when was the last time you sprinted? Oh, it's been years. Well, I run a little bit. I'm like, have you ever run like fast enough? Like either a bad person was chasing you or you were having to chase somebody that just stole your wallet, like that type of sprinting, like sprinting with intent to get somewhere as fast as you can. And I think as we get older, people stop sprinting. I mean, I watch my kids. I got twin girls that are 8. My little boy's 4. My little boy who's 4 sprints everywhere. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's like to the next room, to the hall, like he runs as fast as he can everywhere. And I tell him all the time, I'm like, sprint as fast as you can everywhere. Don't waste time. Don't jog. Run. And it seems to work. But I think that's a really interesting thing. I remember seeing a quote years ago. We don't stop lifting weights because we get old. We get old because we stop lifting weights. I think that same thing is true for not only lifting weights, but sprinting and being an athlete. I think we get into this mindset like, oh, I'm older. I should become more careful. I probably need to start worrying about this stuff. And I think that's when we start talking ourselves into this old age thing.
Absolutely. I think that's where Coach Boyle over the last couple of years, I'm not sure how much you follow his work, but he's been timing the sprints based on some of Tony Holler's work. And I think that goes along the exact same lines that you're talking about with intention, because when you're timing them, now you're saying, I'm going to beat my time. You're competing against yourself. And it's that same idea that has helped those athletes improve their times, get faster, and just be better athletes.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I used to own a commercial gym, and it was funny. I used to get people come in all the time. And I remember one lady came in one day, and she was like, I want to get in great shape. And she had this like kind of, pretty specific. And I was like, well, what do you like, give me an example. And she like pulled up a picture on her phone, and it was during the Olympics, and she had seen like these Olympic gymnasts. And she's like, these girls, like, I would love to look like this. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, you're at a gym, right? And she's like, well, yeah. Is there a training I had to look like these girls? I'm like, yeah, it looks like doing gymnastics. These girls aren't training to look the way they do. Their bodies are a byproduct of the training they do that makes them the most efficient individuals to do this sport. So like, then I realized that people had this, hey, I want to look like a linebacker, or I want to look like I played pro football, or I want to do this. And like, they somehow like see this physical appearance, like, hey, I watch NFL Sunday, these dudes are pretty jacked, I want to look like that. What do you think their training looks like? Yeah. They lift heavy weights, they sprint, they run, they do all these things. But then when you tell people like, well, hey, this is they don't look that way just by accident. Like they're a product of what they do, that I think people kind of get a little confused sometimes. So I'm real big on being like, what's the intent? What are we looking to do? What are you trying to get done? And then more importantly, what can we do efficiently? If you have such bad knee pain that you can't sprint, I'm not going to send you out to sprint every day. Or if the only time you can really sprint is sprinting uphill because it doesn't hurt your knee, then we'll do hill sprints. So I think that there's a way to work around it, but I just think people don't really have intent. They kind of, wander around like drunk college kids at a party with the training, where they just don't understand what the mission is. They don't set a goal. They don't set intent. And then they just fucking shoot from the hip and they never get where they're going. So then all of a sudden the system must be broken.
Absolutely. In my book, I came out with a book last year, Be Like the Best, and I interviewed 50 top fitness professionals. And one of the things that we saw was all those successful people, they knew where they were going. They had their mission. They were goal setters, and they had that idea. They had that path. And obviously, it's you see the best with the best athletes as well. So, but John, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate taking some time out today talking about the power athlete and the power athlete methodology. I'm going to have links to all of John's courses and his some of his workouts on the show notes page. So John, thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always been it's been a pleasure.
All right, that's going to do it for episode 292 of the Strength Coach Podcast. Remember, you can try strengthcoach.com out for 3 days. Just $1. You have access to all the articles, videos, and programs, as well as the best forum on the net. It's the only place to have full access to Coach Boyle. He's on every day answering questions, guys. You got to get on there. It's really the best part of the site. To access that offer, go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your trial. Don't forget at Perform Better, the free summer seminar series every day, Monday through Friday, 2 o'clock. They're free. Check them out. They're going until September. Check it out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and John Welbourn for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength conditioning, performance enhancement, and power. Thanks to Adam Doughty, Tim Robinson, and Train Heroic. Remember, Coach Boyle and I use Train Heroic to deliver all of our online training. Head over there, trainheroic.com, to start your free 14-day trial. Thanks to Alwyn Cosgrove for the Results Fitness University Business of Fitness segment. Check them out at resultsfitnessuniversity.com. Geralyn Coopersmith and the Functional Movement Systems. Check them out at functionalmovement.com. I'm Anthony Renna. My new book, Be Like the Best, consists of 50 interviews with top fitness pros. And after each interview is a Be Like, which is just an action step or a challenge that will help you be like the best. I also have the Be Like the Best workbook, both on Amazon and on Target Publications. And the workbook's a collection of the Be Likes. So you can go to belikethebest.com or continuefit.com for all my resources. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.